Hey everyone, so today's live, this is my little moxa kit, my little take-home moxa kit. In today's live, we're going to talk about when to use our moxibustion and when to use these little suckers, our needles, right? Because this is a really important distinction of when we should use it and when we should use it, what order we should use it, all of these good things. So we're going to talk about that today. If you have any questions about that, please do put it in the chat. And as I'm going along in this live, I will try to answer it as best I can, or maybe we might talk about it more in future videos. So first of all, in moxibustion texts, well, actually, let's start from the beginning. Moxibustion originally, okay, this moxibustion was the first acupuncture. The first text classics about acupuncture. Sorry about that. So the first texts and acupuncture classics were actually all about moxibustion. And then only later on did acupuncture actually come into the picture. So nowadays in TCM and especially in Chinese medicine, our acupuncture needles have definitely become prominent. They've taken center stage. And we usually do TCM, at least in TCM, I've noticed that you do acupuncture a lot more frequently than you would ever do moxibustion. Now in Japanese medicine, and I'm going to say this as a blanket term because each style is, of course, going to have its own particular way that it addresses the body. But in most Japanese acupuncture styles, in a foundational application, usually you do moxibustion after every single major needle point that you insert. Now, when you really break down the difference, though, okay, moxibustion actually is really great at removing toxins that are deep within the body. So when we talk about, if we think about, again, like going back to our Shanghan Lun and that approach to the body, we need to understand exactly where those toxins are, and then we need to treat accordingly. Now, moxibustion actually creates what's called a heat shock protein response. And I'm going to actually practice a little bit while I jab at you because just talking is quite boring. And that way you can kind of see my practice as I'm talking. So in moxibustion, right, it creates a heat shock protein response. And I'll maybe turn this up a little bit. It creates a heat shock protein response in the body. So what that means is the cells below where you're doing your moxa actually create a heat shock protein. And that initiates the entire body to say, look, there's a localized heat. There might be a burn. We need to get more red blood cells, create more white blood cells, and get that to that area ASAP with fresh oxygen to clean and fight off any infection, and also to heal the tissues, right? So it actually does create that on a Western medical perspective. Now, on the opposite, our needles are actually responding to a nerve pain response. Those are two completely different responses to the body. So how that's going to really change how you do your moxa and when you do your moxa is when you're looking to get, classically and in TCM too, they always say that moxa is good at penetrating to deep cold. Well, doesn't it make more sense that when we do our moxibustion and it creates that heat shock protein response at the cellular level, right? Not at the nervous system level, but at the cellular level, it makes more sense now that when we do this, it's actually reaching a deeper layer of the body. So it's actually reaching that deeper layer and getting at that deep cold, that deep deficiency. Let's actually do this close up of my hand, right? So we're actually getting at that deep cold, that deep deficiency within the body, and we're actually able to start tonifying. But where the conversation becomes really, really special is when we start thinking about moxibustion not only as tonifying, which is what I was just doing here, but we start talking about dispersive moxa. So let's say I have a little bit of shoulder tension. I'm a mom. I'm a working mom. So we always go to, I think this is LI10. You guys can correct me if the chat if I'm wrong, but we always, in Japanese acupuncture, it's a bit protocol, but we say that this point is responsible for the shoulders. And so doing a little bit of dispersive moxibustion here can be really, really great for releasing tension in the shoulders. And I can actually feel my upper shoulder just release with that little bit of heat. It's really good at releasing that deeper layer of the body. But now it comes into this really really special conversation of saying, well, how is that any different from when we release that deeper layer of the body with our needle, right? When and how is that different? So this does become a bit of a stylistic response, but when we're needling into the body, we have that nerve pain response, right? And we gather ki or we disperse ki, but we're doing it along that nervous system. And when we treat something with heat, our body responds differently. So, how I personally use moxa and how most of my colleagues, for a generalized approach to Japanese acupuncture, of course, style specific is always different. That most of the time you're going to do moxa at every major point that you've done a needle. And so, if that means usually I'll do anywhere between 1 to, I don't know, 8 points on the back, anywhere between that, depending on what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. Then I'll also do between 1 to 8 points of moxibustion on the back, and I do it according to how I'm treating with my needles. So if my needle is a dispersive needle, then I'm going to disperse with my moxibustion. If my needle is a tonifying needle, then I'm going to tonify with my moxicone. And that moxicone is going to not only reinforce what my needle has done, but it's also going to deepen the effect. And so one of the things I've really noticed, for example, I have a family right now who really just does not like the smell of moxa. And so I'm always disheartened when they come in because I know that if I can just do moxa, I would have even more bang for my buck is a really good expression. I would be able to do more for that client within that time frame because I'm able to get to a deeper layer of the body and really reinforce and solidify what my needles have gone in and tried to do. Now, on the opposite side of the coin, there are definitely practitioners in Japan who are only moxibustion therapists. So, interestingly enough, and a lot of people don't know this, in Japan, there's actually 4 different licenses for practicing acupuncture of different varieties. So, how that works is you have one national exam that they give to you one time a year. And at the end of that, oh gosh, I can't remember how many questions. I've blocked that out of my brain. After the end of 300 or 150 or whatever questions that it is, because it's all subjects in one test over, I want to say it's a 3-hour period. It's been a while though. At the end of the main test that you have to pass to get any one of the 4 licenses, you then have a mini test of 10 questions each. So you'll have a mini test for your acupuncture license, a mini test for your moxibustion license, a mini test for shiatsu massage, which you are not allowed to do shiatsu massage unless you have this license. And then another mini test for what's called judo seifukushi, which is essentially loosely translated into a judo-style bone setter. So anybody who's a seifukushi, they actually have to have all 4 of these licenses in order to qualify to also pass their judo seifukushi exam. So you can go and take your main exam, and then you can also pass just your acupuncture licensure. And you can be qualified to practice as with only needles, but not qualified to practice with shiatsu massage, be a bone setter, or use moxibustion in Japan. And it's a very hefty fine if you use any of those modalities that you're not licensed to do. You can also qualify to only do moxibustion, only do shiatsu massage. Again, with judo seifukushi, you do have to pass them all in order to qualify, I believe. I don't have that licensure though, so that might be a little incorrect, but I believe that that's how it was at least when I was there. So there are some practitioners who are only moxibustion therapists, and there's some practitioners who are only acupuncturists, and how they're going to approach the body is going to be quite different. So for example, there is a practitioner out of Spain who's a very big moxibustion therapist, and he only uses moxibustion. And so he's going to approach the body without even using his needles. And so while he can be effective, and I've chatted with this gentleman before, you can be very effective to treat a lot of things, but there are some things that a needle is just more inherently effective at. And some of those things that I might think of just right off the top of my head is, for example, trigger points. Now, trigger points are very useful therapies. They're part of the sinew channels. They are a very old version of medicine, and they're very, very effective. Now, moxibustion on a trigger point can work. It is still effective, but I would say it's not as quickly and as pinpoint of affection. It doesn't have this pinpoint effectiveness as your acupuncture needle might. Now, on the opposite side of the coin, when we're trying to treat lower lung 5, so Most people don't know that there's a lower lung 5 in Japanese medicine. I'll show you where that is. So we have our lung 5, right? A normal one. Japanese and TCM take them at slightly different sides of this artery vein, I believe. So we actually take it about a sun lower for lower lung 5. And when you have a really bad cold, lower lung 5 on either side, when you palpate them, one is going to be more sensitive than the other. And so one of the things that I learned in school with lower lung 5, to be quite specific, is that when you have a cold, you want to do a lot of moxa, a lot of tonifying moxa on lower lung 5. And that actually helps you not only relieve the lungs, but also to help relieve a lot of the cold symptoms of the upper taiyang. So, but saying that, that is a point that I've tried and not been as effective with needles. Moxa works a lot better. When you have, of course, with cold deficient stagnation, almost hands down, moxa is more effective than the needle. However, for example, my teacher, Yasuda Sensei, who's over in Japan, he actually, I really don't think he says his eyes aren't good enough to see the moxa. I don't believe him. I think he just did too many moxa cones for his teacher, Yoko Sensei. Anyway, he doesn't use moxa at all in his treatment. He only uses the needles, and he's quite effective with it. But in my treatment and my stage of learning, I actually find that without using my moxibustion, I've kind of cut off my right hand. So my main tool of acupuncture is not my main tool. It's actually only 50% of my main tool of acupuncture and moxibustion. So I know I gave you a lot of different instances where you can only use moxa and still be effective, and only use acupuncture and still be effective. But I truly believe that if you can use both your acupuncture and your moxibustion, and usually acupuncture and then moxibustion, it is a lot more effective. Another case when you would only use moxibustion and not your needles. This is when you have neuropathy on the feet. Now, this is another technique that I don't believe is taught in TCM. If it is and you've heard of it, I'd love to hear about it. Please do put it in the chat. I'd love to know where you learned it as well. And also, please don't forget to like and subscribe, hit the little bell. So when people have neuropathy in their feet, let's talk about diabetics, nerve problems, lots of varicose veins, perhaps they're overweight, things like this. And we're going to just say this is the foot for lack of me not wanting to show my foot on camera. Be a bit awkward. So usually when I go through, I'll actually don't have my marker here, and I'll actually push on the pads of the feet right below the toes, for example. Also that kidney 1 area, perhaps on the heel. These are really common areas to have neuropathy. It doesn't have to be there, of course. And then I ask the patient, how does this feel? And they usually tell me, oh, I can't feel that very well, or yes, I can feel that, or that's a little numb, or no, I can't feel it at all. And then you actually take your moxa, and you're going to burn your moxa repeatedly in a tonifying, stacking way, but you want to do it until it feels hot. Now we have a layer on our hands called the horny layer. It's very interesting. I have a whole video just about the skin. It's very interesting to study the skin and understand it. But that horny layer actually prevents us from being able to feel heat very quickly as we would on other parts of our body. And we have that especially on the palms of our feet and our hands. And so usually what happens is they don't feel anything, and then all of a sudden, boom, it's really, really hot. And so usually you want to do the moxa repeatedly at those points that are numb or partially numb until it feels really hot. And this is a half grain direct cone, not a chinatsu cone, not pole moxa. They do not work the same way in this situation. And then after it feels hot to them, and it should feel not warm, but hot, and it won't leave a burn, honestly, unless your half grain mox cone is not super great. And then you want to do one more cone that's not hot, just a tonifying cone, and then leave it. And almost immediately, except for very rare cases, it'll bring back all of the feeling in their feet. And I've tested this out with hundreds of clients. The most significant client that I've tested this kind of moxa therapy for neuropathy on, a really interesting client that I saw when I was still in Japan. He was actually a gentleman from the US. He used to work for the electric company here in the US. And at one point, he said an electrical wire from the electrical wires that are spun in between poles actually fell on his foot. And it fell, if this was kind of the big toe here, it fell across the big toe, and I believe the second and the third, if my memory serves me correctly. And I actually did hot moxa. And he didn't have feeling. He had neuropathy on those areas of his toe from that knuckle onwards. For God, he said like 20 or 30 years. At that time, he was a rather older gentleman. I want to say in his late 70s or 80s. And I did this hot moxa actually on the top of his toes rather than the bottom, because that's where he had the neuropathy. And he, in one session, in about 5 minutes, got the feeling back in his toes that he hadn't had for like 20 or 30 years. So it's very significant and a very powerful treatment that I actually don't recommend doing with your needles. The moxa is really, really good at helping to wake up the nervous system, wake up the blood flow. Whereas in that case with neuropathy, not only, and I'm sure as an acupuncturist, and definitely as a student, you definitely felt what it feels like to be needled in your feet. And it does not feel good. Like, nobody wants to be needled in their feet. It really sucks. Everyone hates it. And I should take that back. Most people don't like it. And also with neuropathy in the feet, I found that I've never gotten the same effect. And I've actually seen one of my teachers, Kaneko sensei, who's unfortunately passed at the moment, passed to the other side. I've seen him do needle top moxa on kidney 1. And it was, of course, he was amazing. His technique was painless, but even he said that there are times, especially with the neuropathy treatment, that you don't use the needles. That's a time when moxa on its own without the needles works much, much better. And I wish I had a really great explanation for the neuropathy as to why those needles don't work. But really, those kinds of situations, neuropathy on the feet, getting really deep toxin out of the body, especially in the upper chest, of course, cold deficiency. These are really great opportunities to use the moxa, perhaps on its own. Scar treatment as well. Moxa is great. Teishin therapy can also work as well. But really, these are instances when having a mentor, especially within the Japanese medicine tradition, can really be beneficial to your practice. I highly suggest that you search out, whether it be someone like myself, or someone like Stephen Brown or Jeffrey Dunn, or even Erlen Truitt down in New Mexico. There's a lot of other practitioners worldwide that you can seek out. Make sure that you have someone who's very, very good and has studied this medicine deeply, because the opportunities to learn when moxibustion on its own is very powerful. And then also when needles and moxibustion combined. And then perhaps when you don't use your moxibustion quite as much. And then how to use your moxibustion in ways that were definitely contraindicated when you were in school. Some really good examples of that is moxibustion on the neck and on the face. I've had very, very good results with this, but it's also something that I would tell any of my students, unless you know how to do your moxibustion quite well, you want to refrain from doing direct moxa, of course, on areas of sensitive skin, especially on the face. If you scarred the face, that's a lawsuit waiting to happen. So anyway, I'm not going to ramble anymore about the moxibustion and the needles for today. I would very much like to hear what your experience has been when learning with learning moxibustion, and when you've been taught to use moxibustion, and what combinations you've learned to use your moxibustion with your needles, and how you're actually implementing it in your practice as well. All of these things, it's really good feedback for me to understand what's going on outside of my little space bubble, and how to help you all out there across the world more by spreading this amazing Japanese medicine that I was privileged enough to learn in Japan. And I very much hope to spread to the rest of the world. I really do feel that Japanese medicine is amazing, and can help so many more people help their clients to reach their goals in their health. So if you're with me on that goal, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button, hit the little bell to be notified of newer videos coming out. I do a live video every single Wednesday on different topics. Next week, let me see what my topic is for next week. I don't remember. Next week, I'll be doing another live here on YouTube, all about Japanese medicine, and I will tell you the exact topic here in a second once it loads up. I'll be doing that every single week, and it's usually between 5 to 6:30 p.m. Mountain Standard. So do hit me back here for that, and I just have that list out now. So next week, we're going to actually be talking about the difference with direct moxa and indirect moxa. So why there is a difference there, when to use your direct moxa, when to use your indirect moxa, and just really talking that through and understanding it. So if you have questions about those things, please do come to the live next Wednesday. I'd love to hear about them. You can also DM me your questions if you feel you're not able to make the live because of your time zone. And yeah, if you'd like to learn more about Japanese medicine and have a one-on-one mentorship with me and a whole community of practitioners from around the globe learning Japanese medicine, please do sign up for an interview with ShinKyu University to see if it's a good fit for you and your practice. All right, everyone, thank you so much for joining and learning with me today. I really do appreciate your time. And until I see you next time, please do keep practicing.